Hello, welcome back to Emerge, the health podcast for busy, high performing women. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Swenson Ridley, and today I'm posing a question that some of you may have had, or maybe you've never heard of this, but that is, what in the heck is a flow state? Coming up later this week, we're going to be, my interview is with a young woman who understands this really well, but I wanted to give a kind of pre discussion around this because it's honestly it's a question on my paperwork, and literally like 90% of the women who answer it are like, what the hell does this mean? Sorry for my language there, but literally, like, what in the heck is this? And I have finally come to this place of really understanding it on a deep level, and it's been within the context of I've been recommitted to doing my PhD in integrative and natural medicine. And one of the things that we're learning in there is about hypnotherapy and neurolinguistic programming, both really cool tools that, I don't want to turn anyone off to anything. Like, there's a lot of misunderstanding around, I think, in particular, hypnotherapy. But what's interesting about it, and what I've learned a lot about, is just understanding the brain and how it works. So I'm going to just throw some facts and stats at you real quick, and then we're going to dive into this question of, what is a flow state? And so first, the first thing we need to understand is, I think it's Bruce Lipton who has shown that we only use 8% of our brain for conscious thought. And so that means that the other 92% is subconscious stuff that is running in the background. And what's really interesting is, when we're trying to make changes, when we're trying to, say, lose weight or quit smoking or quit drinking, or, just make some sort of behavior change, and we try to go about it in a conscious way, why we fail and why we mess up, or have a hard time, or can't figure it out, or can't stay committed, or any of these things, is because we try to do it on the conscious level, but we have all these subconscious patterns and things that go on. And so I talk a lot about, and a lot of the work I do is all about shifting perspective and taking your blinders off. And that's one way where we access more of our brain to really understand ourselves better. But it's really not getting to the crux of, like, I think you can do it a lot more quickly by actually communicating with your subconscious brain. And that's where, a lot of like neuro-linguistic programming and hypnotherapy and cognitive movement therapy, which is something I've had a woman on the show talking about that, EFT, all of these kind of get into that more subconscious level of thought. And what I wanted to talk about and just share about with this is, there's ways that we can do that on our own. There's a reason why everyone talks about meditation or prayer, or, having these periods of time where you just kind of sit still and be quiet, because that is where, like, when we go into relaxation mode, that is where different brain waves start to get woken up in our body. And the majority of us spend pretty much all of our time, especially as adults, in what we call, there's different brain waves. So there's at least four. I think there's more than that, but those are the four that I'm going to talk about today. And most of us spend all of our time in beta state. And where beta state is it's our, we're conscious, we're stressed out, and we're in reactionary mode. And that's where we spend pretty much all of our time. And what doesn't work about that is, we can't really make change from there. We're just kind of constantly running on this, and we completely lose our creative side and our ability to flow. And so what the flow state is it's actually, and we're going to talk about this in this interview on Thursday as well, but it's actually where we are able to tap into those other brain waves that's specifically the alpha and the theta. And so alpha is kind of our intuitive, sensing, creative world starts to flow. And then the theta is where we get in, like, that deep level of relaxation just before we go to sleep. And that's actually where our brains are most creative. So that's where, we might come up with solutions to our problems, or, tap into things that we want to do or want to achieve, but maybe we feel stuck and don't see a path forward. That's where that new perspective can really come from. And, if you think of artists or writers, or, people who are like, I get this when I play my violin. It's one of those cathartic experiences where you just kind of get lost in what you're doing, and time stops, and, you look up and it's been like 3 hours and you're like, whoa, what happened there? That is a flow state, and that is what we're trying to tap into. So I'm going to keep this really short because we're going to dive into this so much more on Thursday. But what I wanted to challenge you to just think about is, like, how connected are you to your creative outlets or to those places in time where, like, not in time, but those things that make time stop. There is no, one of the things I've learned that I found so interesting is there's no concept of time in the subconscious. Like, time doesn't exist. And so that a lot of, I've shared a lot of my favorite book, which comes up like all the time, but called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. He gets into that. He doesn't say this specifically, and this is like I'm starting to add more layers to my own understanding of things. But he essentially talks about a flow state. Your genius zone is where, or your zone of genius is where time stops, and you can just go and you have no concept of that, and you're just like in the zone. You're in the flow state, right? And that is because in those things, you're actually tapping into your alpha and theta waves, maybe more alpha than theta, if you're awake and like doing things. But I want you to think about, like, what are those things for you? Do you even know what they are anymore? A lot of the women I work with are like, I have no idea. Like, don't know what, and these are the things that probably fill your cup, right? Like, don't even know what they are. And a starting point, I know it's so hard for us to make time for meditating or listening to things, and there's different tools and resources out there to help you do this. They don't have to be hugely time consuming. I will admit, as much as the next person, I struggle, especially as I'm part of my hypnotherapy training, is like we actually listen to recordings and kind of do it ourselves. And being hypnotized doesn't mean a lot of things. It doesn't mean that you're like at someone else's control, or you're fully aware and have the ability to lie under hypnosis. Like there's, I think, a lot of stuff that's been perpetuated just by what we think of, like the guys on the stage who are hypnotizing people. Like, I think of, they had a hypnotist come to our graduation. We had a project grad night where everybody stayed up all night, and some hypnotist guy came, and it was funny and whatever. And so some people are able to get into that state where their subconscious is more running the show and they're not as aware, but you still have some awareness. I'm botching this a little bit. What I'm trying to get to is, like, hypnosis is one of those things that puts you in the state where you have alpha and theta, specifically brain waves, starting to go. And so there's things you can listen to that increase your theta waves. There's, meditations that include some of that in the background that make it even more effective. And you don't have to do it for long. It can be like 5 minutes, and, you still reap some benefit from it. So I'll put a couple of those resources in there, or I'll say what they are, and then you can, download them yourself. One's called Brainwave, and I actually use that when I'm flying on a plane because it has theta beats in the background of just some ambient noise, and I cannot sleep on airplanes. And when I listen to that, I at least like relax and feel somewhat rested whenever we get where we're going. And flying from Alaska, we're constantly flying like at 2 a.m. or in the middle of the night. It's just how things work up here. But that's one of the things that helps me relax in that particular setting. Or if I'm having a hard time going to sleep, like, that's something that'll fade, is that state right before you go into deep sleep, which is your delta waves. So that's one option. Then there's another app called, and that one has a free version where you get like a 10-minute meditation, in the free version. And if you want to pay, then you have access to more stuff. But then there's another one called Brain Tapping. And this is one I've been experimenting with, and the guy who's teaching my course actually is responsible for having created it. But they have different themes of things that you can, so it does take a subscription, so it's like $10 a month, but gives you a bunch of different options of things to try and just like start retraining your brain. Because I think for most of us, when we are dealing with being stressed out, with not taking care of ourselves, with not making time for ourselves, all of those things, we are operating in that stress mode of beta, and we've totally lost touch with our creative side. And I know since I started working on this with myself, like, I suddenly have lots more ideas and like more energy, and I'm accessing that flow state more often, and it's like exciting and cool, and there's good things coming from it. And also with healing, and with my body working better, and like all the things that have been going really well lately has been some of the things I do, like I shared about coffee enemas a couple weeks ago, but also just from being able to access and kind of start to train my brain to use some of those other waves more often than when I, just kind of stay tired and stuck and all those things. So if you are feeling stuck or frustrated, or, don't even know what things you like anymore, like, this is a really good place to start. And on Thursday, we're going to dive into even more depth around like why this is important and how you get into it. with a young lady named Gabby, who's young but quite the powerhouse in understanding all this stuff. So I think you're really going to enjoy that. So come back Thursday for that episode, and we will see you next week.